Okay, so I did my paper on gender inequality, and I said, inequality among genders in today's society is an extremely prevalent topic despite the fact that we are living in a modern society. Women are oppressed in the most basic ways in some third world countries, and while women are not considered oppressed in some first world countries, they do still feel the discrimination against their gender. Within the past few years, inequality in all aspects has caused a large uproar. Just this past year, the largest women's march took place in Washington, D.C., and in total, 2.6 million people marched for equality all over the world. I believe this is a very important subject because it truly affects the generations that follow us. To implement change, our generation must be the ones to stand up and take it. In the United States, women see discrimination regularly, whether it be in the workforce or on the streets. The pay gap is one of the most controversial topics being discussed today. A woman earns 74.5% of what their male counterpart makes, yet in studies conducted in 2010, the number of women with a bachelor's degree surpassed men by about 3%. If you were to think logically about the statistics, it does not make sense that a woman should earn 25% less of their yearly income than a male does. In 2016, 21 women held positions as CEOs according to the Fortune 500, compared to 1998, where there was only one woman. While this seems like a significant increase, it is still 21 out of 500 CEOs. That amounts to 4%. Overall, this research confuses me. The United States takes pride in how they compare to the rest of the world, but in 2016 we fell to number 45 when it comes to the gender gap. That is outstanding. I do not think anyone would predict that the United States would fall so low on such a progressive issue. Girls today are raised to do great things, and women are encouraged to step up in a male-dominated workforce, but how is it possible when they continue to be boggled down by discrimination? It only makes sense that if a woman was given 74.5% of their earnings, then they should only be required to do 74.5% of the work. But that mindset would never succeed in our world. Instead, women have to work twice as hard to earn 25% less. In January of 2017, 673 women's marches took place in all 50 states, as well as in 32 different countries. The women were protesting gender inequality, which was a heightened issue when President Trump was sworn into office. They stood against the Republican-led government, which they believed had intentions of cutting back on reproductive as well as human rights. President Trump has allowed for the defunding of Planned Parenthood, an organization that is centered around women's preventive health. This includes cancer screenings, birth control, and STD testing. Without it, millions of women will lose security. Compared to other countries like Afghanistan, this does not seem like a huge deal considering women who live in those areas cannot even access proper health care, but this is a large step back for the modern United States we claim to live in. The freedom of women to take charge of their body has been an encouraging aspect in our society. Women are freer than they were just 2 decades ago. But the marchers were not just passionate about women's health. One stated how many were angry about the lies Trump told relating to education, climate change, and marriage equality. I know that it is hard to be living under a president who has made racial slurs, insensitive comments, and taken drastic actions, and I do not understand how someone could support someone who is so morally wrong. But it is why people now feel as if it is their personal responsibility to stand up for human rights. I believe by doing this, it shows the rest of the world that we do not tolerate injustice. Gender inequality varies greatly from country to country, and even though women in the United States are outraged by what is affecting their lives, the women in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan are fighting a much larger struggle. The world needs to turn their attention to the oppressive regulations that surround women in these 2 countries. In Afghanistan, women are banned from working, leaving the house without a male escorting her, showing her skin in public, and many more. One woman in Kabul reflected on the time the Taliban shot her father right in front of her because he had allowed her to receive an education. I truly cannot fathom a world like this. Often people take for granted the world we live in. And while I do not take away from the fight women are fighting in the United States, it brings you back to reality when reading about how women are treated in these areas. In 1,000 Splendid Suns, written by Khaled Hosseini, Miriam and Lila are subject to these laws that are strictly enforced in Afghanistan. Miriam was married off at age 15. She was not given any choice in who she would marry or what her future would be like. Instead, after the tragic death of her mother, she was forced into a life where she tended to her abusive husband Rashid, everything Miriam did, including how she would dress and who she would associate with. On the other hand, Lila received a more fortunate childhood. Her father, who was a professor himself, allowed Lila to gain an education. Once Lila's parents died, though, her only real option was to marry. In Afghanistan, women are not allowed to leave their house without being accompanied by a male. Because of this, Lila knew living on her own would be impossible, so she sacrificed her future to provide for the child she was carrying and became Rashid's second wife. Throughout their marriage, Miriam and Lila experienced brutal abuse. Rashid would hit them, speak down to them, and on multiple occasions he threatened their lives. The abuse was the result of something as little as them not cooking Rashid's meal to his liking. On one occasion, he put the barrel of his gun into Lila's mouth, and on another he choked her until she turned blue. Once Lila's life was in jeopardy, Miriam acted by killing Rashid with a shovel. It saddens me that killing their husband was the only way to escape. In 2013, Global Rights conducted a study where they found that 85% of Afghan women had experienced some type of abuse, and they estimated that 2,000 women had attempted suicide as a result. Even worse, women living in these conditions today will justify their abuse. They believe that doing the slightest thing wrong makes it okay for their husbands to act violently. I think that is the worst part. Yes, of course, reading the statistics of women living in these unsafe conditions is heartbreaking, but the fact that they do not know any better may be a little bit scarier. In the United States, men may be arrested for any type of domestic violence, and it is engraved into girls' minds at a young age that they are never to accept abuse. Many Afghan women had to learn to accept abuse as part of their daily lives. One survey conducted said that 92% of women who were abused felt their husband was right in beating them. Things started to look more positively once the Taliban was ousted from power in 2001. A new constitution was created that included women's rights, and in 2009, the Elimination of Violence Against Women Act was put into place. Girls' enrollment in primary education also saw a significant increase, but despite these progressive motions, there are still areas that are controlled by the Taliban in Afghanistan where these ideas are unattainable. In Saudi Arabia, women are facing the same struggle. They mostly live by the same rules that Afghan women live by, but their country has been deemed more patriarchal. Recently, there have been articles written by the New York Times and CNN encouraging Saudi Arabian women to tweet in or email them about their stories and what they wish to change about their society. Many focus on the male guardian aspect of their culture. Women are assigned a legal guardian, similar to the way children have legal guardians up until age 18 in the United States, but instead of becoming free at 18, these women will live the rest of their lives having someone dictate their decisions. The guardian will normally be the woman's father or brother. The father or brother may or may not give the woman permission to travel abroad, get married, or even have access to health care. One teenager wrote into the New York Times stating, "I got into an accident once in a taxi, and the ambulance refused to take me to the hospital until my male guardian arrived. I had lost a lot of blood. If he didn't arrive that minute, I would have been dead by now." Between 2011 and 2015, there have been 250,000 asylum applications made to the United States, yet only 29 were approved. Many of those who are seeking an international escape are educated, and they have the means to afford the uproot, but male guardians do not allow it. This is such a shame because these women are looking to further their lives, but it is not their choice. This is such a culture shock because in the United States, the majority of parents encourage furthering your education. You pick your college, you choose a major, and you may even choose to study in a foreign country. Yet the women living in Saudi Arabia must seek permission to see a doctor. Nations around the world are taking steps to transform their society into one that is completely equal, and recently Iceland has been the first country to do so. This is an issue that will affect our generation and the generations to come, so it is important that we take it seriously now. If a society cannot achieve harmony within it, then how does it expect to succeed? I believe that for the world to find a balance, it must begin with your own surroundings. We have to find solutions to conflicts that continue to arise, and one major one is gender inequality. Once we learn to understand one another, we will be able to prosper in all aspects.